My son slid an envelope across the counter. It said, "Rent due, $8,000, and my own name was on it like an eviction notice. My hands trembled, but I swallowed the shock and quietly wrapped the cut on my palm with a paper towel. The next morning before sunrise, I worked all 3 of my jobs without saying a word to them. They had no idea this was only the beginning of what I was about to uncover. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from at 5:15 a.m. The coffee maker hissed like a warning. I kept my breath shallow, holding the pot away from the counter so the drip wouldn't splatter. The plate slipped anyway. Porcelain met tile, and the kitchen answered with a sharp white crack. A scatter of shards, a bead of blood blooming on my thumb. I reached for a paper towel. Before I could pull one free, Valora's voice floated down the stairs, slick and awake. "Seriously, it's not even 6. She swept in silk robe tied like a perfect bow. She looked past my hand to the fragments, then to the coffee that dared to exist before her alarm. "This is why we have rules," she said, turning to the fridge as if speaking to the stainless steel. Cassian stayed in the doorway, arms folded. On the counter sat a thick envelope stamped in red rent, due $8,000 in 3 days. The ink bled where a drop had landed. My thumb stung. My son's face gave nothing. I switched off the machine. The kitchen fell quiet in the way a house does when it's not yours. I said nothing. They had a rule I never sign no noise before 8. It lived on the fridge in Valora's handwriting tucked between photos I'd taken and she'd cropped me out of. I wrapped my nicked palm with a dishcloth, then swapped it for a bandage from my purse. Blood had a way of telling the truth on pale towels. Cassian reached past me to rescue a matching plate from the cabinet. "That set was expensive," he murmured, still not looking directly at me, as if eye contact would cost him something extra. Valora opened the red-stamped envelope, slid the paper out like a magician, taking credit for someone else's trick, and laid it flat on the island. "Due in 3 days," she said, tapping the date. "Please don't make this awkward." I rinsed the machine, poured what coffee survived into my travel mug, and twisted the lid until the rubber squeaked. Valora trailed a finger over the counter as if checking for dust. "Try to be considerate," she said. I kept walking. At the market, the fluorescents made every face look tired. The register beeps counted out other people's mornings, while my back counted hours. My name badge snagged on my scarf and hung crooked. I straightened it between customers and smiled anyway. "You look pale today," my supervisor said, kind but worried. "Take a sick day." I shook my head. The rent clock was ticking loud as the belt that carried cereal and oranges passed my hands. I tucked the bus timetable deeper into my apron so it wouldn't fall when I bent to grab stray cans. The scanner light drew little red roads over barcodes, and my fingers bandaged found a rhythm. I kept my pace. House cleaning paid less but asked more of the wrists. I folded hotel corners on other people's sheets and tried not to breathe the lemon too deeply. A picture frame tipped as I dusted, and I caught it mid-slide, heart thudding like I'd dropped something that mattered. By 4, I had 40 minutes at home. The driveway held their cars. The stairs above the foyer carried laughter, screen bright untroubled. On the kitchen counter waited glossy bags from the expensive Italian place, a receipt peeking out like a white flag, $180 plus a generous tip. It sat on the credit card I refill with my hours. I ate a peanut butter sandwich over the sink, turning the water to hide the sound of chewing. The red envelope watched from the fridge with the patience of a debt collector. I exhaled. At the diner, coffee came bottomless, and apologies did not. A trucker called me ma'am with a warmth that softened something I didn't know was clenched. Orders stacked. I moved in Loop's refill plate check until motion felt like language. On a napkin by the register, I totaled this week's hours with a blunt pencil 67 by Sunday if I didn't falter. $8,000 took weeks of my life before the government even asked for its share. Between tables, I pressed that napkin flat with my palm as if numbers could stop sliding around. The cook slid me a slice of pie at 10 as if sugar could stitch hours together. On the last bus, streetlights braided the windows with gold. I breathed. Back home at 11:40, the kitchen had the stillness of a stage after the curtain. I set the red envelope on the fridge and pinned it with a magnet shaped like a seashell tourist junk from a life with vacations. I slid my spare key into my coat pocket and held it there until my heartbeat evened out. The house was not listening. Houses rarely do. I poured the last inch of cold coffee into the sink, washed the mug, and dried it with the corner of my sleeve. No more paying to be erased. I whispered to the cabinets, to the magnet, to myself. The vow landed softly the way a stone disappears into deep water and still changes the surface. I will mend. St. Anne's Hall breathed out the smell of coffee and casseroles as I stepped inside. Folding tables made a bright rectangle under fluorescent lights, and a welcome desk held a jumble of name tags and black markers. I paused, smoothing my coat, letting the room's chatter wash over me before I reached for a blank badge. "So you moved into your son's place, right?" "That's generous of him," a woman said, her smile too bright for the gray morning. She nodded at me as if the answer were obvious. I felt my throat hold still. "It's temporary," I said. "Kids these days step up." "It's sweet." My plate was styrofoam and light, the kind that bends at the edges. I kept my hands from shaking by keeping them busy spoon casserole green beans a single roll. I smiled because the room asked me to. The smile did not move my eyes. It held like a lid over a boiling pot. "Your boy must be a good one," the woman said. "He has a kind heart," I answered, which was once true and might be again, but today was mostly a prayer. She slid a plastic fork toward me, reward for a correct response, and I took it without comment. I moved along, choosing fruit I didn't taste, collecting small talk and careful nods as if they were receipts I'd need later. The chair legs scraped anyway, a squeal that underlined the moment. On the bulletin board, flyers overlapped like shingles. Lost cat, blood pressure check, and there a plain sheet with a blue stamped line, senior legal clinic, free consult, bring documents, no exclamation points, just instructions and a phone number with a local exchange. I stood closer until my breath fogged the glass. I tore off a tab, folded it twice, and slid it behind my driver's license, where I keep the photos of the grandkids from Christmas. A volunteer in a red apron glanced up from refilling cookies. "You okay, ma'am?" "I am," I said, and for once the words felt true in my mouth. Not better, but oriented. I returned to the table, tucked the tab into my wallet like a tiny hinge, and sat where the sun softened the hall's harsh lights. By afternoon, the market's break room smelled of oranges and floor cleaner. The corkboard held notices no one read, and a calendar that still thought it was January. I pinned my hours sheet beneath 3 name badges, each clipped to the frame like a specimen: Aurelia Customer Service, Aurelia Residential, Aurelia Server. The plastic was cloudy from years of use. The corners had whitened and bent. Under the column marked "Week Total." My handwriting crowded the box 67. I took a photo, the camera's shutter a small righteous click. Paper doesn't argue. It simply stacks up until it shows weight. I opened my planner and slid the legal clinic tab next to next week's shifts. 2s 2 to 6 market, 191 housekeeping, 2-5 mid diner. The letters looked like fence posts on a long road. Someone laughed in the hall, a big easy sound that didn't belong to me yet. I drank water from a cone cup and let it rinse the ache from my jaw. When I clocked back in the register, beeps fell into rhythm with my breath, and for the first time in days, I could imagine the inside of a future conversation where I wouldn't duck my head or make excuses. Evidence first, then sentences. That was the order. After the potluck and the shift, the bus moved like a slow animal down Harbor Boulevard. The windows held a mirror of my face layered over tire shops and palm trees. A boy in a hoodie stood to offer his seat. I thanked him and stayed standing, feet braced for each stop. Kindness is easier to accept when I'm upright. I made a list in my head, download voicemails, pull bank statements, photograph receipts, copy the lease, print the $8,000 notice in duplicate. The aisle rattled as a stroller bumped aboard, and a baby's sigh untied something in my chest. I practiced the sentence I would use if someone asked again about my living situation. I would say I pay more rent than most landlords charge and leave it there a clean line they could trip over or walk around. At my stop, the air smelled like laundry steam from the coin wash. I cut through the alley behind the taqueria past the mural of bright marigolds and felt my shoulders drop as if they'd been holding an invisible box all day. Inside the apartment, I set my planner on the table and wrote the list in ink. There is a relief in lines and boxes in proof that does not waver when voices do. I folded a stack of dish towels the way my mother taught me edges to the middle, then half small work that keeps a person human. By the time the sun slid toward the water, I had 3 folders labeled and a calm I trusted. Night laid a quiet over the kitchen that belonged to me as much as anyone. I took the spare key from the communal hook by the back door and stitched it into the coat lining with 3 quick passes of thread. Then I set the legal clinic tab beneath a tomato magnet, the kind you win at a fair for guessing the weight of a pumpkin. The magnet clicked softly against the fridge, a private punctuation mark. In the living room, the couch springs gave their usual complaint when I sat. I set tomorrow's alarm earlier than habit, before footsteps before doors, so I could move without commentary. On the table, my planner lay open to a week that finally looked like a map instead of a maze. I closed it with my palm as if sealing a letter to my future self and let the house hum itself to sleep around me. Right. At 11:40 p.m., the kitchen barely breathed. I slid an envelope onto the table. Paid, final in thick marker, and pinned it under the tomato magnet. Upstairs, the heater sighed. The house answered with the familiar creak outside Cassian's door. I kept the lights off. License in my pocket, medications, in a pill box, social security card, in a paper sleeve, the peer photo of Harold and me, wrapped in a dish towel. I lifted my spare key from the hook and closed my hand around it until the teeth pressed a neat pattern in my palm. I didn't leave a note. A note invites debate. The envelope was enough. The hallway still smelled of lemon cleaner and last night's garlic. In the small room that used to be my son's, the twin bed was already neat. I folded the blanket anyway, more habit than need, then set a canvas tote by the door. Outside, clouds carried the city's glow. I waited for the stove clock to blink 11:44, the minute the old bus used to pass when I worked nights. I locked the kitchen, pocketed the key, and left without a sound. The car started on the second try. I steered past HOA perfect lawns and the cul-de-sac where kids once chalked hopscotch. At the gas station, I paid cash. A patrol car idled 2 pumps over. The officer looked bored and young. I watched numbers flip, listened to the steady click of the pump-counted breaths. Back in the driver's seat, I set my phone to Do Not Disturb and let the GPS guide me to Santa Ana. Leaving means room enough to breathe. Freeway signs slid by, 405/55 green panels like measured advice. I spoke tomorrow's list into the quiet the way Harold used to before fishing trips: keys, lease receipts, bank records, voicemail downloads. At 55, the wheel stopped vibrating. A delivery truck drifted past and rocked my car. Then the road returned to its string of workable pieces. I didn't go far. I took a corner booth, ordered oatmeal and coffee, and ate until my hands steadied. The waitress called me Han without making it small. I dialed the number from the For Rent tab I'd saved one a manager named Harlan had posted by the bus stop. Voicemail. "This is Aurelia Voss," I said. "I can pay first month and a modest deposit." I left my number, folded my hands around the cup, and watched the door swing open and closed on the same night. The clock on my phone crept from 2:18 to 3:07 to 4:41. I dozed in the car under a security camera coat over my lap tote buckled like a passenger. Delivery vans hissed by the world being made ready for morning. When the sky turned pewter, I washed my face, put on a touch of lipstick for courage, and counted my cash twice. Tips quarters, small bills, enough. At 7:45 a.m., my phone vibrated. "This is Harlan," a steady voice said. "You left a message about the unit I did. Can you meet now, brick building on Cypress? Parking in back. I'm 5 minutes out." The complex was modest and clean, the kind that survives by staying true. Harlan wore a canvas jacket and ball cap, the look of a man who fixes things and prefers not to talk about it. He unlocked a second-floor unit and stepped back so I could enter. The living room faced east and caught light. The kitchen was older white fridge, a stove with honest dings cabinets that shut. The bedroom would fit a full bed and a small dresser. The bathroom mirror did not lie. First rule, he said, setting 2 keys on the counter. What's yours is yours, your business stays yours. Second rule, rent on the first. I don't do late fees because I don't do late. He watched my face weighing. I can do that, I said, laying out the cash in 2 neat stacks and sliding over my ID. No pets. I rise early. I keep a schedule. He counted, wrote a receipt, and tore it off. Gate and unit, he said, handing me the plain ring. Mailbox 6. No smoking, no noise after 10, and I don't mediate family fights. You won't have to. His grip was sure. When he left, the door latched with a solid click. I stood in the center of the room and let silence arrive. From my tote, I lifted a packet Harold had labeled years ago, Harold's Tomatoes, 2011. He saved seeds the way other men saved ticket stubs. I set the packet on the sunniest slice of sill and felt a thread tug toward a season not yet here. I unwrapped the dockside photo, set it beside the seeds, and smoothed the towel back into my bag. 2 plates I own went into 2 cabinets, 1 mug on the counter, 1 shirt on a hanger. I made a list on the counter. A table would come later. Proof. I wrote along a shoebox in thick letters. Receipts here. Bank statements. Screenshots of transfers. Voicemails saved before anyone can delete them. The box sat beside the seed packet like a promise. Before noon, I texted Mavis, the neighbor who spots everything without being unkind. If your doorbell camera saved anything with my name on it, please keep it. She replied with a thumbs up and a small heart, a message that doesn't demand a second thought. Good. Energy is a budget, too. I tested the deadbolt twice, feeling the click in my fingertips. Not a prison door, a boundary. I brewed the first cup of coffee I'd made for myself without apology, in longer than I care to measure, and drank it by the window where the dust looked like snow. The red envelope lived back in another kitchen now. Let it. I lay on the carpet until my heartbeat slowed, then stacked tomorrow's papers, pay stubs, timesheets, the photo of my 3 badges under an hour's total 67. The legal clinic tab I'd torn from the church board slid under the magnet I'd brought a little tomato with a chipped leaf. Small circles close. When I was young, leaving meant slamming doors. At 64, it's a checklist and good shoes. It's choosing a sunlit corner for a planter box because you intend to be here when seedlings ask for string. A child in the next unit laughed. I let it wash through the wall. In the hush that followed, I heard Harold the way I always do. Before new starts, depth, then distance. Give the roots a place to go. Depth, then distance, I answered. I turned the deadbolt once more and picked up my pen. Morning light laid a clean stripe across my Santa Ana kitchen table. I set a shoebox in the center, uncapped a thick marker, and printed 1 word across the lid: proof. Manila folders fanned out the way I once laid out Cassian's permission slips, neat dated answerable. Rent payments, work hours, voicemails, correspondence. On a yellow pad, I penciled the days. The temperature in that house dropped the coffee comment, the plate on tile, the noon laughter. I emptied my coat pockets, gas stubs flecked with rain-curled tip slips, grocery receipts that still smelled faintly of oranges. Each one I flattened, circled, and dated. My phone sat on a potholder so it wouldn't skate. I logged into the bank, opened statements, and downloaded PDFs to a new silver USB bought yesterday with diner tips. File names carried month and year. Binder rings clicked shut with the sound of decisions. In a ruled notebook, I drafted an index so any stranger could follow the money without needing my history. I scrolled to Mavis's number and pressed call. She had been my neighbor for 13 years. She could tell the time by the trash truck and the porch light. Mavis, it's Aurelia. Do you still have doorbell clips from last month? A beat then, her plain voice, I do. 30 days automatic. Some are saved longer. We walked through dates like 2 women piecing a quilt. There was that early morning with the coffee. I have it. The noon when voices carried. Marked. The night I left. If the bell triggered, it's there. We agreed to meet at the Santa Ana Library's viewing room. Originals, only timestamps visible. At the corner copy shop, a bell tinkled when I pushed in. The clerk, a young man with ink-stained fingers, showed me the scanner and the green light that passes under each receipt. I fed the paper's patient edges square. On the screen, I built folders that would make sense to a tired future. Me rent, payments, labor, proof, voicemails, doorbell pending. The printer hummed and spat out a one-page checklist with empty boxes. I paid in cash and wrote my name on the 32-gigabyte drive with a strip of tape. The library's viewing room was the size of a pantry, just a table, 2 chairs, and a screen. Mavis arrived with a canvas tote and her familiar briskness. She plugged in her USB and we pulled on headphones. The first clip framed my front steps and the cracked pot of rosemary. The door opened, my figure crossed, and off-screen, a voice Valora's snapped clear as glass. "You're a useless old woman." The time code glowed lower, right like a courtroom clock. I did not flinch. I saved the file to my master drive and exported a still that showed my hand at the knob, timestamp burning steady. On my notepad, I wrote in block letters, "Recorded at source by M. Thorne. Observed and copied by A. Voss." We signed and dated a single line. I generated a checksum so the bits would testify if anyone claimed I had tinkered. The librarian rolled past and nodded. We copied the noon clip to "Laughter in the stairwell, a delivery left, cooling me, returning with a brown bag and leaving again 20 minutes later." It was not loud, but it was clear. Back at my apartment, afternoon softened into the kind of light that forgives. I opened the shoebox and slid the newly labeled drive inside. Then I took out Harlan's spare USB, the one he'd lent me, with a shrug and a "have a backup always," and duplicated every file. The checksums matched. I breathed, then steadied. I placed both drives in a zippered pouch, set the printed still on top, and added a sticky note in thick letters, "Recorder Life Estate Copy." Monday. The lid closed with a dry, honest sound. I set the box beside Harold's old seed packet on the window ledge. The paper was soft from years in a drawer, the handwriting a little faded. Harold's Tomatoes, 2011. I touched the edge with my fingertip. "Not yet," I told the packet, as if the man who saved seeds also saved patience. Soon there would be potting soil and a cedar planter. Soon there would be something in this place that grew because I tended it. For now there was order and my quiet name on my own lease. I made tea, and while the kettle clicked, called the senior legal clinic and left a message. My name, my situation in 3 sentences, and the best time to reach me. Between shifts. Then I updated the index. Rent checks, transfer confirmations, work schedules with supervisor signatures. A green check next to doorbell footage copied signed, and another next to backup created. I capped the pen and let the apartment breathe the refrigerator's low hum, a bus breaking a neighbor's steps. Before evening, I wrote a short note to myself and slid it under the lid. "If anyone doubts, you will not. You were there. You lived it. You kept the record." I initialed the corner and let my shoulders drop, the 2 inches they had been holding since last year. Monday's list sat by the seed packet ready recorder's office. Print deed copy. Ask about certified duplicates. Follow up with clinic. The lock turned sure and even. Outside, laughter drifted past. The sky went lavender, then blue, then that deep California ink that makes streetlights look like moons. I rinsed my mug, folded the dish towel once neat, and set it on the sink's edge. The shoebox waited square and modest. The seed packet waited light as a promise. I was not finished, but I was no longer lost. At the Orange County Recorder's counter, the fluorescent lights made every face a shade paler. I laid the certified copy of my deed on the formica, the one with the life estate clause printed like a spine. The clerk read in silence, then reached for a heavy red stamp. The thud landed like a quiet gavel. Ink bled the date and time across the margin. The printer groaned a receipt and a recording number that finally attached to my name. I asked for 2 certified copies and an index printout. She slid them to me in a clear sleeve. "Keep the originals dry," she said, the way a nurse warns you about stitches. I nodded, paid, and slipped the sleeve into my bag like a small living thing. In the public workstation room, I typed what needed saying in plain speech: notice of occupancy and recorded life estate. Under it, my name, the parcel number, the street, and the fresh recorder number. No adjectives, no pleading. Just facts arranged like fence posts. I stapled the receipt to the corner, then added the doorbell still frame as context, not accusation, a picture with a timestamp, a voice I no longer needed to repeat. 3 copies slid steady from the machine. I signed and dated each one, watching the ink settle as if it were concrete. A breath in, a breath out. Paper could be louder than people if you let it. I set the folder on the passenger seat, buckled it like a rider, and drove toward Costa Mesa. The freeway hummed the way it always has: white lines, palm shadows, billboards promising outcomes no one can guarantee. At a red light, I reread the notice, not to change it, only to feel the dryness of words that hold. I switched the radio off before I reached the neighborhood. The house wore a new flag and fresh bark in the planters, dressed to reassure strangers. I parked half a block away, smoothed the crease in my skirt, and took the folder in my left hand so the right would be free to open the door. Inside, the air smelled like cookies and lemon cleaner. A sign-in sheet waited by a silver tray. "Welcome the listing agent," chirped a woman with a smooth bun and fast eyes. "I'm Paige. We'll be taking offers this week. The sellers are motivated." "Are they?" I said, friendly enough. I took a flyer and looked at glossy photos of rooms I used to scrub. "Is the occupancy clear?" "Absolutely," she said, quick, a reflex. "Fully vacant after closing." I unfolded the notice and placed it on the entry table so the header faced up. The red recording number sat under the title like a small torch. "This says, otherwise," I said, "no heat on it." I set a certified copy of the deed beside the cookie plate and kept my hand still. The couple in the kitchen stopped talking and leaned back without meaning to. Paige's eyes moved left to right, then down to the stamp. Her phone appeared before the silence finished settling. "I'm just going to call the office," she said, voice thinner. She turned away a half step, lowering it to a whisper. "We may have an occupancy cloud. Yes, a recorded life estate. No recorded this morning. I have the number." The couple drifted closer to the front door, pretending to study trim. I stayed where I was. I did not explain the law. I did not add adjectives. The notice and the red number did all the talking I needed done. The buyers set the brochure back in the acrylic stand as if it might bruise. Paige ended the call and pasted on a professional smile that could not find her eyes. "We'll need to clarify some matters before continuing today's event," she said to the room at large. "Thank you for your time." I gathered the copy I meant to keep and left the duplicate on the table where the next set of shoes would stop. "Please disclose accurately," I said, steady as a level. No one argued. Somewhere in the staged living room, a clock ticked like a sympathetic metronome. I stepped into bright noon. In the car, I let the silence sit with me for 3 full breaths. On the drive home, I didn't gloat. I planned. The proof box would hold the new receipt and the index page. My logbook would get 1 clean line. Open house paused. Notice served. The point wasn't victory. The point was accuracy that could not be sanded off later. At a long light, I pictured the tomato pot on my windowsill and felt my jaw unclench. Back at the apartment, sun slanted across the small table. I filed the recorder's receipt behind the rent payments divider, added the index printout to correspondence, and clipped a sticky on the deed copy that read, "Show on request." I wrote the log entry in block letters, then underlined the date. The room felt honest: chair table, shoebox, window, nothing extra, nothing missing. On the sill, the empty pot waited. I filled a glass and poured slowly into the dry soil that would soon hold Harold's seeds. I sat and let my shoulders fall. Today had been paper and posture. No speeches, no scenes. A number recorded in a book thicker than pride, and a notice layered over cookies in a house staged to forget me. I turned the certified copy face down so the stamp wouldn't shout in the quiet. The proof remained whether I looked at it or not. I washed my hands, made tea, and stood by the window while steam rose like a small flag no one else needed to see. Before bed, I checked the door twice, then once more for habit. The building's hallway thumped with someone's laundry basket. I set tomorrow's alarm, slid the pen into the notebook's spiral, and looked at the waiting pot again. A garden starts with one honest patch of earth and the promise you won't let anyone salt it. I had made a promise today. At the bank's fraud desk in Santa Ana, Miss Ree slid a thin stack of printouts across the counter and rested a fingertip under a line I had never seen before. Marker Costa Mesa, poker and card, she said, voice, even as if naming a brand of paper clips. I let the words sit. Casino credit. Borrowed in minutes, paid back when the house wanted, not when a family could breathe. I steadied my pen and wrote the word as if it might run off the page. She explained how markers worked: a quick signature, an electronic pull, a debt that wasn't called a loan until the calling came. I watched the numbers and kept my mouth closed. There is a time to speak and a time to record. I asked for the last 12 months tied to that descriptor. The printer hummed patient and relentless. Pages landed face up a rhythm of weekends and late nights amounts that repeated until they looked like wallpaper. Some lines were marked, settled, some reversed, but the totals told a story nobody had read to me. I circled entries near each rent due date and kept my breath even. Miss Ree slid over a brochure about problem gambling with the same neutral kindness she had used with the printouts. I accepted it and asked for stamped copies labeled Customer Transaction History. She typed printed, stapled, and set the stack between us like a thin brick. Another page surfaced with a different tone entirely. Unusual activity, she said, and showed a list of incoming credits that mirrored the marker repayments. The originating name was an entity I did not recognize. She reminded me she could not speak about third-party accounts, but she could give me a general letter the bank had flagged activity and might limit access while they reviewed. I asked for the case reference, spelled my name, and watched her stamp the corner with the number and today's date. She slid it across. I slid it into a clear sleeve. We didn't need to say anything else. Outside, the sun was clean on the sidewalk. I opened my planner, wrote the case number again, and put the brochure in a side pocket I rarely used. Numbers had started to speak. My part was to keep them from being interrupted. I drove toward Costa Mesa and parked in a public lot beside a sandwich shop with a clear view of the casino entrance down the block. The shop door chimed when I paid cash for a small coffee. I sat where the window glass kept the wind honest and watched the swing of the security door up the street, an ordinary hinge for unordinary debts. Late afternoon makes faces look unguarded. A man I knew well came out with two others, laughter too loud for that hour sleeve tug to hide the paper wristband. I wrote the time and a simple description in my log jacket color step pattern, who held the door. I did not lift my phone for a photograph. I did not step out to make a scene. I have learned that scenes often become excuses. Evidence does not need to shout, it only needs to be kept. Security ambled past my table and asked if I was waiting for someone. Yes, I said, meaning myself, and tipped my cup so he could see the coffee. He nodded and moved on. When the sun tilted down, I took one more look at the entrance and then at my notes. The lines on the page matched the lines the bank gave me. Paper and pavement finally in the same room. Back home, the apartment held the late quiet that belongs to people who have paid for it. I set the bank printouts on the table, opened the 3-ring binder, and clicked the metal open. Hole punch, align press. Line. The ring bite sounded like a door locking from the inside. I created a new section labeled Financial Flow and another titled Labor Proof, then cross-referenced page numbers in the index at the front. On the computer, I typed a 1-page summary markers, aligned with rent demands. Deposits into her account reflected repayments. Dates overlapped with threats about being short. I exported it as a PDF, added Ms. Ree's case reference, and saved everything to the master drive and the backup. A checksum note went into the margin. When you have been doubted, you learn to make doubt expensive. The brochure on problem gambling lay where I had dropped it, face up and unjudging. I read it once slow, as if it were a map a stranger had pressed into my hands. It spoke of self-exclusion lists, cooling off periods, financial guardianships. The words were not weapons to me, they were doors. I wrote a single sentence in my planner that I could say without shaking, "I will help if he helps himself," documented. The dashes mattered. They kept the deal from bleeding. I set the alarm for 6. Before turning out the lamp, I copied Ms. Ree's case number onto a sticky note and anchored it to the front of the proof folder. The folder stood by the door like a quiet companion, square and ready. I boiled water and let a tea bag swim while the apartment settled. The seed packet on the sill caught the last inch of light. I touched it with one finger, a small vow that did not require witnesses. Sleep comes differently when resolve has a place to sit. I washed the cup, dried it, and put it upside down so the rim would not collect dust. The brochure slid under the planner. The binder closed with a calm weight. I turned the deadbolt and tested it once. If morning brought a knock, I would open the door just enough. 10 minutes. One last clean chance measured in breath and paper, not anger. I set my phone face down and let the screen go dark. The room sighed. So did I. At 6:30 a.m., the knock came 3 soft taps that still knew the wood. I left the chain on. I opened the door a hand's width and set my phone on the hall table with the timer face up 10:00. "You have 10 minutes, I said. No yelling, no money. His eyes were rimmed red from a night without sleep and years without truth. He nodded and swallowed. The timer slid to 9:57. He started with childhood. "Remember the field trips? You always signed the forms." His mouth tried a smile. "After Dad died, I kept my voice even. I left the house, not you." The timer read 8:42. I stepped back far enough to stand at the small table, but I left the chain in place. The room smelled like tea and lemon cleaner. He stared at the floorboards like they owed him. "I didn't know about the life estate," he said. "It's complicated." I said, "It's recorded." He flinched the way people do when paper speaks louder than they planned. "I can fix this if you'll help me bridge one thing," he said. "Just this once." He lifted his hands, palms up, a pose I knew from 100 smaller asks. I laid a folder on the table and slid one page to the edge within reach, but not offered. "This is the only help I'm offering," I said. "It's conditional and it's written." The heading read, in plain type, "Conditional Support Plan." 5 lines followed, "Not complicated, enroll in the 12-week residential gambling program, sign the California self-exclusion forms for the local card room and casino, no requests for money debts or bridges, weekly attendance verification sent directly to me, a written apology acknowledging the rent abuse." I slid across a legal aid letter confirming tomorrow's consult and the brochure with the hotline. He leaned forward. "They'll hurt me if I don't pay today just $2,000. His voice shook on the amount. I shook my head, once slow. "I will drive you to intake at 9 tomorrow," I said. "I will not fund your addiction or your debts." The timer showed 4:56. He tried another door. "Valora's scared. We're drowning. I only charged you because you were drowning," I said. "You held me under to breathe." The room went quiet enough to hear the refrigerator cycle and a bus 2 streets over. He stared at the plan. His eyes stalled on the word apology. "You want me to write that I did that to you? I want the truth in your handwriting," I said. "For both of us." He looked up, and for a moment the boy I knew stood in his own doorway. He picked up the pen. He signed the self-exclusion forms, first name, date, license, the boxes that authorize a guard to escort you out. His pen scratched like a small saw. He initialed the page that allowed the program to confirm attendance to family. "Intake at 9, I said. "I'll be outside at 8:15. He nodded and pressed his initials beside the date. The timer slid past 2:03. He set the pen down and covered it with his hand. "What if I can't sleep tonight?" he asked. "You can call the number on the brochure. You can take a shower. You can walk. You cannot ask me for money." He stared at the timer like it might give back the past. The timer buzzed. I stood. I unhooked the chain and opened the door wider enough for morning to find the tile. "Time," I said. "Here are your copies." I handed him the photocopies, the plan with his initials, the self-exclusion pages, the intake address. I kept the originals and slid them into a clear sleeve already labeled in black pen, "Doorway Plan," signed. "I'll see you at 8:15, I said. "If you aren't there, we're done." It was the sentence I wrote last night. I let it stand between us. He hesitated on the threshold, glancing past me at the shoebox on the counter and the small packet of tomato seeds on the sill. "You're really growing those?" he asked, as if the future were a rumor. "Yes," I said. "I'm planting what I can keep." He swallowed again, tucked the copies into his jacket, and left without another word. The hallway took his footsteps and left me the quiet. I locked the door twice. I scanned the signed pages, saved them to the master drive, then to the backup, and named the files with the date and the words, 10-minute door. I wrote the time in the logbook, a line 6:30, 6:40 a.m. Plan presented signatures. Secured transport offered. My tea had gone cold. I drank it anyway. I texted the program a single word. Confirmed, and set an alarm for 7:45 time to sit with my hands quiet before the drive. The apartment returned to its small sounds, a neighbor's radio 2 floors up, the hum of the old refrigerator, the building's bones shifting as the sun found them. I placed the originals in the proof binder and closed the rings. I folded the brochure and left it by the sink in case fear tried to borrow my resolve. The copy of the plan lay clean in the file, and the timer face showed zeros again, blank and harmless. I washed the mug and set it mouth down on the rack. I wiped the water rings from the table where the pen had tapped in rhythm with the seconds. I straightened the slip with the case number from the bank and tucked it behind the clear sleeve. Then I stood by the window and let the light land on my left hand, the one that remembers the plate, the blood, the red envelope. I pressed my palm flat on the cool glass. "I will help if he helps himself," I said to the room. Documented. By noon, I knew which way the day would tilt. A neighbor's voicemail waited with a too bright voice and a pause where truth should be. I let it play to the end before saving it to the folder that bears my name. I replayed the voicemail twice, then saved it. "Honey, they're saying you're not well." The caller ID was a number from my old street. I took a screenshot and filed it in a folder labeled Rumors. My pulse rose, then leveled. I breathed once and dialed Mavis on speaker. "Mornin' sugar," she said. I repeated the sentence word for word. "All right," she said. "They want to turn worry into a leash. We'll give them paper that doesn't bend. 2 witness letters," I said, pen ready. "One from you, one from someone steady." Content. I reside independently in Santa Ana, oriented to person, place, and date, and I have not asked for rescue. She added, "We'll date and time the observations. We'll sign in ink. I can get Daryl, retired CHP, to sign. We set the plan, a simple template-stamped return envelopes, originals mailed to me, photos kept by each signer. I'll grab blank forms from the library if they have them, or we'll make our own," she said. "You keep your hours." A knock arrived 3 firm. I opened the door. 2 uniformed officers stood with Harlan, who held his key ring and a neutral expression. Ms. Voss, one said. "We received a request for a welfare check." Harlan spoke first. "Ms. Voss is my tenant," he said. "She asked me to be present for any surprise contacts. She is oriented and independent." "I can speak for myself," I said, and stepped into the hall's strip of light. "My name is Aurelia Voss. Today is Wednesday. I live here in Santa Ana and plan to go to work in the library. I am safe and not in crisis. I prefer no family contact at this address. I rest and heal." "May we see ID?" the second officer asked. I handed over my license. He looked, returned it, and asked the soft questions they are trained to ask food medications, self-harm. I answered plainly, yes, yes, no. I added that my building manager can verify I pay rent on time and keep the peace. They wrote an incident number on a card and gave it to me. "If you receive repeated, unfounded checks, reference this," the first said. "Thank you for your time." Harlan nodded once. The air in the hall eased. When the door clicked, I set the card on the table, opened my laptop, and drafted the form we had discussed. Title: Statement of Observation. Fields: Name, address. Relationship to Aurelia Voss. Date and time. Observed statement of competence and independent residence signature. At the bottom, I added, I understand this statement may be shared with medical or legal professionals for the limited purpose of confirming wellness and residence. I printed 3 copies. Harlan knocked lightly. You all right? He asked. I am, I said. Would you sign a limited witness line address? Facts only. Facts I can do. He read the form, then wrote, I am the building manager for 1412 North Grant. Ms. Voss resides at 2B, pays rent on time, and appears oriented during routine interactions. He signed and dated. I photographed the page for my proof drive and slipped the original into a sleeve marked Witness Letters. I addressed 2 envelopes to Mavis, enclosed a copy of the template and a note. Please sign if comfortable. Date and time the observation. Keep a phone photo. Thank you. I stamped and sealed them. On my way down, I dropped both into the blue mailbox at the corner. The metal mouth clanged. Sun warmed the walkway. My phone buzzed. Mavis again. Got Daryl, she said. We're parked by your old curb for 10 minutes. I saw you last week at the library and again Sunday after church. I'll write that. Daryl will write he spoke with you today and has seen you in your car. We'll mail originals this afternoon and keep photo backups. Note the times I said, already on it. Okay. Back upstairs, I scanned Harlan's page and created a new folder on both USBs. Witness letters. I saved files with the date and initials, then noted the wellness check in my log with the incident number. I made tea and watered the planter where Harold's tomatoes will go when the soil warms. The phone rang again, another neighbor ID. I let it roll to voicemail and listened. The voice circled the rumor, people are worried. You sounded strange. I saved the message, wrote down the time, and moved it into rumors. Feeling is not a fact, paper is. By late afternoon, Mavis sent 2 photos, her letter, and Daryl's, both dated and signed. In hers, Aurelia Voss resides independently in Santa Ana, oriented to person, place, and date. I have observed her in ordinary activities and conversation. She has not requested any rescue or wellness check. In Daryl's, I have spoken with Ms. Voss and observed her driving safely and handling routine tasks. She appears well. I replied with thanks and asked them to mail the originals as planned. Mavis added, I know you and you're steady. Evening settled. I scanned the letters, checked their checksum files, and wrote a final line in the log rumor addressed by paper. Wellness check documented. Boundaries intact. I slid the officer's card into the proof box beside the seed packet. The apartment returned to small sounds, the kettles ping a neighbor's laugh, the building settling into its evening bones. The phone buzzed one last time. I let it go. Sun reached the far sill and a strip of light lay across the table. I watered the soil again a spoon's worth and turned the lock twice, not from fear, but from belonging. Tomorrow could bring whatever it wanted. Tonight I had paper keys and a name that faces forward. I parked across from the house I once mowed, around nose of my old sedan pointed toward the coast wind. Late afternoon light laid a strip of gold across the driveway. I wrote the time, the weather, and the address in my notebook and kept the pen uncapped. A black SUV idled in the concrete mouth beside the lawn I used to weed by hand. The engine thrummed windows glossy as sunglasses. Valora came out with her phone held like a badge. She scanned the street quick, the way people check for witnesses when they are about to do something they should not. Then she leaned into the driver's window. A hand with a heavy watch rose to meet her. Their kiss was unhurried and sure. I kept my camera at chest level, took 2 photos without a flash, and let the sound of the shutter be swallowed by the motor. When the SUV eased forward, I stayed seated and wrote what could be seen without guessing. 3 plate characters were visible before the turn hid the rest. The dealer frame said Newport. On the rear glass, low right corner, a clean decal with serif letters, Hail Capital. I took one more picture. As the car angled toward the boulevard, the logo centered and sharp. I drew the letters in my notebook and underlined them twice. I do not chase rumors. I write down what is in front of me and I keep copies. The air smelled like cut citrus. A wind chime from a neighbor's porch counted out a slow, even beat. 2 blocks away, a coffee shop offered outlets along the wall and a table that did not wobble. I bought a small drip and asked for the receipt. At the corner seat, I opened my laptop and created a new folder named A Fair Observation. I airdropped both photos from my phone, exported the metadata to a text file, and generated checksums the way the legal clinic had shown me. Master drive, backup drive. The same rhythm I used for every page in the proof box. I typed a short memo in plain language, observed public display of affection at former address, remained in public space, no contact, noted decal. I stepped outside to call the bank fraud desk. Ms. Ree answered with the same precise tone I had heard before. I spelled the name that was now inked in my notebook. Hale, Hale, capital. I can't disclose third-party account details, she said, steady, but I can confirm what you already have from your own history. Your prior printouts show repeated incoming credits with a name that includes Hale, timed closely before marker repayments to the card room. I can't discuss amounts. Keep any public documentation you gather and note times. She read me my case reference number again. I wrote it beside the word Hale and boxed both in red pen. We ended with thank yous and no drama. I stood by the curb and let the call end the phone, warm in my hand. Back at my apartment, I laid paper on the table the way nurses lay instruments for a clean procedure. On the left, the bank's customer history pages that list credits into the joint household flow I used to fund rent. In the middle, the marker repayment dates from the casino statements attached to my earlier inquiry. On the right, my new memo and a print of the driveway photo with the decal visible. I drew arrows, wire in, marker out, demand to me. I placed the dates in order and circled the alignments. No adjectives, no heat, just lines that met where they should not meet on days that had pressed me hardest. I slid the printed photo and the chart into a thin sleeve labeled Disclosure, Occupancy, and Financial Context and set it on the edge of the table where I could not miss it in the morning. The room held its breath and then gave it back. Across from the binder, Harold's seed packet lay on the sill like a small green promise, without roots yet. I picked up my planner and wrote a line I could stand behind in daylight. Ask Valora. Which life are you choosing? No speeches, no raised voice. 3 minutes at most with one question and my feet under me. I washed the coffee cup, wiped the table, and checked that the photos had saved to the backup drive and that the checksums matched. The clock on the stove tipped toward evening. Somewhere down the block, a neighbor played a radio, soft a Motown chorus that remembers what patience sounds like. I let the sound come and go. The phone buzzed once and stilled. I did not check it. I had what I needed, a public kiss, a public decal, a name spoken in a calm voice by a cautious professional, and a pattern you could trace with a ruler and a quiet mind. I stacked the sleeves until the edges were flush. I turned off the lamp and stood by the window for 1 more minute. The house across town would lock from the inside tonight. That, too, would be a choice. I cannot unlock other people. I can only keep my door, my drives, and my small garden to be. Tomorrow I will carry the sleeve to the porch I once power washed, and I will ask the question that requires only a yes or a no. If there is noise, I will step back. If there is silence, I will let paper speak. And if there is truth, I will hear it without falling apart in front of anyone. Tonight I will sleep and my notes will stand for me. I stood on the porch I once power washed where I used to set geraniums. This will take 3 minutes, I said. I raised my phone so the screen faced us both and tapped the timer. The chain stayed in my pocket. A jacaranda rattled its pods. Do you want him or do you want this life? Valora folded her arms. You rehearsed that, she said. I rehearsed being clear. The timer read 2:46. I placed a thin plastic sleeve on the coir. These are copies. Keep them. Inside the sleeve sat 3 things. The driveway photograph taken from a public curb, the timing chart that showed wires in and markers out, and the recorder's red number that said my right to be here could not be sold like a sofa. I let the paper sit in the sunlight. She tilted her head. "You're confused," she said softly. "He's a colleague. What matters is disclosure." I pointed without touching. "If funds come from a business relationship, name it. If there is a personal relationship, name that. If occupancy is clouded, say so. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to make sure buyers aren't misled." The timer showed 1:58. Her expression rearranged into pity. "You need help, Aurelia. People are worried. We've said as much because you've been unstable." "A welfare check already came and went," I said. "Officers met me at my address in Santa Ana. I answered every question. Do not use me as a story to dress this porch." I kept my tone level. "Volume is a tax you pay to the wrong collector." I set a single page on the iron table beside the staged lemons. "Cease and desist," the header read. "Cease defamatory statements including unstable and missing. Cease sending third parties to my residence. Honor the recorded occupancy rights." Below, I typed the recorder's number and listed Paige Allerton and her broker on the courtesy copy line. A second packet lay beneath it labeled Open House Disclosure. Valora laughed once short. "You're threatening me. I'm putting the fence where the survey says it belongs." The timer read 0:51. "Future contact by email only. If there's something for me, write it. I'll answer if it requires one." A sedan rolled to the curb as if called by the clock. A courier handed her a small envelope. A card slipped out and rested against the boards. I did not touch it. I photographed it where it lay, wide frame her shoes, the porch tile pattern, the card, Marcus Hale, Hale Capital Partners. The timer ticked to 0:12. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. "You think this scares me," she said. "It isn't meant to." I stepped back to the public sidewalk. "It's meant to be accurate." The timer sang its alarm. "Your 3 minutes are up." I ended the timer and turned not in triumph, but in completion. On the sidewalk, I phoned Paige. She answered on the second ring. "Ms. Allerton." I said a disclosure packet is on the porch, and I'm emailing the same. It includes the recorded number, the open house notice, and a cease and desist regarding the welfare check rumor. I'm not asking you to arbitrate, only to disclose. "I understand," she said. "Please send it to the brokerage as well." "I will." I walked to the corner and breathed. A boy on a scooter skimmed the sidewalk and gave me a shy half wave. I lifted 2 fingers. My hands did not shake. Filing is steadier than anger. Back in Santa Ana, I set my tote on the table and opened the laptop. I scanned the cease and desist, the porch packet, and the photo of the card. Each file name began with the date, then a plain description, 2025, 03/27, cease desist, Costa Mesa, 2025 Upper 3 to 27 in disclosure. On page, 2025 03 to 27 Hale Cardi porch context. I saved them to the master drive, then to the backup. I added a line to my index porch conversation, 3 minutes, served C&D, photographed public card, called broker. Email sent. I composed the email carefully. To Paige and the broker, I attached the PDFs and wrote 3 sentences. Please suspend showings until the occupancy and disclosure issues are correctly reflected. Please confirm receipt. Future contact regarding me should be by email. I CC'd my own address and pasted the recorder's number beneath my name. Before I hit send, I read every word out loud. The room had that clean, empty sound new walls hold. 2 floors down, a radio played a ballad from when my son was a boy. For the length of one chorus, I let myself remember the weight of him asleep on my shoulder. I pressed send at the start of the bridge, and the whoosh felt like a small, good door closing. I printed the delivery confirmation and clipped it to the packet I'd kept. I slid both into the proof box, then watered the shallow rectangle of potting mix where Harold's tomato seeds will live. Sun spilled across the counter. My phone chimed one message from the brokerage showing suspended pending disclosure review, another from the rehab intake desk, short factual, "He's late." I sat down. I did not call. I set an alarm for 20 minutes and let my eyes rest. Finished is for a task. Done is for a person. I am not done. I am the one who labels the folder and keeps the key where I can reach it. When the timer buzzed, I opened my planner and wrote tomorrow's square in black ink Clinic 9 EU0. If he signs, I will drive him. If he doesn't, I will not. I closed the book and turned the deadbolt twice. Outside, the jacaranda's pods had gone still. The room held. The fence at last sat on its posts. I set the box by the seeds. Okay. The clinic lobby clock read 9:37 when he finally pushed through the door, hair-damp eyes scanning for exits like a man measuring the distance to his next excuse. I stood but didn't step toward him. "You're here," I said. "That's what matters." The receptionist slid a clipboard and a thin blue pen across the counter. He took a seat 2 chairs away, shoelaces untied breath, catching in little stutters. I watched his hand print his name, then pause at the insurance line. A bead of sweat ran from his temple to his jaw. He wiped it with his sleeve and kept writing. The clock ticked in the clean, neutral air. I folded my hands and let the room be steady for both of us. Mr. Delgado called his name. We walked down a short hall with motivational posters that weren't trying too hard. In the intake office, the counselor's tone was warm and procedural. 12 weeks residential, he said, tapping a page. Day 1, screening and detox protocol. Week 1, no phone. Daily groups. GA meetings, financial literacy, individual counseling. He slid a treatment agreement forward. No outside cash accepted. All incidentals through the program. You'll draft a primary harms and amends list by day 7. I placed a copy of my conditional support plan on the table. "This is already signed," I said. "Rides attendance verifications. Family session. No money." Mr. Delgado added it to the chart without comment. Cassian read, set the pen down, picked it up again, and signed where the flags told him to. The scratch of the nib sounded louder than it was. In the hallway, I handed him a small spiral notebook the size of a pocket Bible. "For amends," I said. "Dates, names, what you took that wasn't yours money-time trust. Debts of truth first, dollars later if the counselor approves." He tried a smile that didn't stick. "Can you spot me a little cash for the vending machine?" "Ask the program," I answered, matching his softness. "You'll eat 3 times today. If you need anything, ask them." He nodded, shame and relief braided together. We touched fist to shoulder, his then mine, the way we used to when words got in the way. A tech opened a door and led him back. I let the door close and breathed, once the way you do, when a plane's wheels finally leave the ground. In the parking lot, I called the Family Day coordinator. "Ms. Pratt," I said, when she answered Aurelia Voss, parent of a new admit. She confirmed a family session in 2 weeks and gave me a code to verify weekly attendance. I wrote the letters and numbers on a yellow sticky, then repeated them back. "That'll work," she said. "If he signs a release, you'll get updates from his counselor. Otherwise, this code is what we can give." "I understand," I said. I slid the sticky into a clear sleeve labeled Rehab Verification and took a photo for the proof drive before I drove away. By the time I reached a shady side street, my phone buzzed with a subject line I could feel through the glass. From page listing, status withdrawn. The body was brisk and professional. Showings canceled pending seller compliance with disclosure. Undisclosed occupancy and financial items unresolved. Your recorded number and cease and desist are noted in the file and copied her broker's compliance address. My reply was 1 line acknowledged. "Thank you for updating the public record." I saved the thread as a PDF, named it with the date, and filed it into disclosures. I did not smile. I let the quiet consequence sit where it belonged. Another ping the county alert I'd set after recording my life estate. Instrument recorded, notice of default trust, deed. Yeah. The line was clean black text on a white background, indifferent as weather. I printed the index page only and clipped it behind the withdrawn email. Paper doesn't blink. I said not to gloat, but to remind myself why I'd chosen documents over shouting. The porch had taught me that 3 minutes can redraw a map. I drove to the clinic again and parked under a jacaranda that hadn't bloomed yet. Inside, the receptionist checked a screen and nodded. "He's with group," she said. "You can leave a message." I wrote, "Keep the pen moving. I'll see you on family day," and folded the slip in half. No heart, no underline, just ink and a date. On the way out, I passed a bulletin board full of phone numbers, half for meetings, half for jobs. Recovery looks like paper tacked at eye level. Back home, I watered the basil and thyme and turned the herb pots so each could take a fair piece of sun. The balcony chair faced a slice of sky and a tangle of utility lines that sang when a breeze caught them. I brewed tea and opened the second spiral notebook, the one I keep for my own amends, the ones no one asked me for. I wrote, "I release what I can't carry." I dated the page and closed the cover. Then I opened the proof box and slid today's pages in intake signature sheet, attendance code, photo listing, withdrawn PDF, the index page, for the notice that had finally found its way into public view. The box wasn't heavy, but it had weight. The phone rang again. Page, this time voice, clipped by professionalism. "We've updated MLS and notified interested parties. If you receive inquiries, please direct them to the brokerage." "Understood," I said. "And thank you for acknowledging receipt of my packet. Your documentation was clear," she said, and that was all. We hung up without sentiment. Accuracy does not require friendship. I logged the call in my index time and summary, then taped the tiny T tag into the margin because it pleased me to mark that I'd been calm while I worked. Near dusk, I called the clinic desk. "Attendance verification for Cassian Ward," I said, giving the code. The staffer read back, "Checked in for morning group present for intake assigned counselor Mr. Delgado." I thanked her and wrote those words on the yellow stickies twin in my notebook. I didn't call Valora. I didn't need to. The porch documents were traveling the routes they were made for. The house would not sell on a story. The county would count what it counts. And my door, my small rented door, would open only to who I invited. I took my tea to the balcony and watched the light withdraw from the brick across the way. A woman walked her dog along the sidewalk, pausing when the terrier insisted on smelling a single crack in the concrete. The simple patience of it, the way she waited without checking her phone, felt like a prayer that had nothing to prove. I breathed that in. The basil leaves had a peppery sweetness when I brushed them with my thumb. Somewhere below, a radio played a ballad that belonged to a decade I had survived. I let it play to the end. When the first star pushed through the gradient, I came inside and set tomorrow on paper. "Call Ms. Pratt to confirm release forms," I wrote. "Email legal clinic with update. Review utilities in my name. Photograph statements." I added one more line, a promise to myself, plain and enforceable. No rescues, only rides. Then I turned the deadbolt and touched the seed packet on the sill. Harold's careful handwriting growing softer each time I held it. The jacarandas would go purple soon. I pictured the street under them, the little confetti. They drop the way people step through it and then track the color home without meaning to. That's how recovery lands too, on your shoes first, then on your floors, then in your hands. By the time the apartment dimmed to a friendly blue, my inbox chimed once more. The clinic automated a note, family day scheduled. Bring ID, no outside food. I smiled at the rules. Boundaries are just rules that learn your name. I closed the laptop, washed the cup, and left the chair on the balcony facing the sky. Tomorrow would be work again, rides, records, rest. Tonight could be simple. By the time the jacarandas bloomed purple, we would both know the cost of honesty and the price of peace. The jacarandas had turned the rehab courtyard into a soft cathedral of purple. Family day moved in a slow circle. Graduate sponsors, a clap that was more breath than thunder. When Cassian's name was called, a counselor pinned a small enamel triangle to his shirt. He looked thinner, not starved, just pared down to the person I used to catch glimpses of. We sat on a sun-warmed bench. No hugging. The silence did the whole introduction for us. "I'm here," he said. I can see that I answered. We watched petals drift onto the concrete like new snow that had learned color. I took in the small things, steady hands, no twitching knee, his eyes meeting mine without skittering away. I had promised myself I would not audition my hope for him. I let it stand on its own feet. He opened the spiral notebook I had given him months ago. A thin list waited on the first page. Amends, he said quietly. Debts of truth, not dollars. He read how he charged me $8,000 a month, how he called it rent to our friends, how he used markers at the card room and told himself it was just a bridge. He did not reach for my hand. He did not ask for a dime. He asked for a list. 3 things, I said. No financial asks. A weekly call after your GA meeting, and 1 practical task a week that I choose rides, fixes watering when I'm out. If you miss, we reset next week. No penalties, no borrowing against the future. He nodded, wrote them down, and signed his initials in the margin. The pin on his shirt caught the light and steadied there. A breeze lifted the jacaranda petals and set them down again like a second chance, remembering how to be gentle. That evening, I sat at my small table in Santa Ana, the herb pots dark against the window. I opened the county's public index on my laptop. The words were plain, bureaucratic, and final trustees, deed upon sale, recorded today, instrument number below. Vesting changed. The house I scrubbed for holidays now belonged to math. I printed the index page and slid it into the folder marked Property Closure, behind the emails from the broker who withdrew the listing months back. I wrote 1 sentence in my journal. There was no victory dance in me and no fresh grief that could bite. Foreclosure had cut the knot I could not untie. My lease, my keys, my paycheck, my garden, those were the rooms I could actually sweep. Saturday came with practical mercy. Harlan met Cassian in my kitchenette to replace the hinge that had been slipping. 1/4-inch driver, Harlan said, handing him the bit. Cassian checked the bubble level, seated the screw, and closed the cabinet. It held. We kept talk in the present tense. No autopsy, no prophecy. When they were done, I handed Cassian a paper sack with tomatoes from my planters and a sprig of basil that still smelled like afternoon sun. He didn't refuse, and he didn't reach for Gasmo. "See you after GA," he said at the door. "I'll be here," I answered. That was the whole contract. At dusk, I went out to the balcony. The city hummed a low, even note. On the shelf near Harold's seed tin, I set a small jar with a label I'd printed, "For visits, not rescue." Inside was a spare key. I texted one line, "You are always welcome to knock with empty hands." The message sent, and I slid the phone face down. I tucked the seed packets back into the tin, then opened a fresh row along the planter's edge. The soil took the water like someone receiving news they had already decided to survive. Below, a dog barked twice, then gave up. In the courtyard, someone laughed. It did not take anything from me. I thought about what I kept. I kept the proof because memory is human and paper is stubborn. I kept the boundaries because love without offense becomes pasture for anyone passing through. I kept the garden because something should answer the sun with color. And I kept my name because the story others wrote for me was never binding ink. If you are listening from a kitchen like mine with a quiet lamp and a cup of something warm, and if you have been used for your loyalty or your patience, here is what helped me write one rule you can live by and keep it for 7 days. Do not argue it. Do not explain it. Keep it the way you would keep a flame cupped from the wind. If it steadies you, keep it another 7. When the night settled, I walked back inside and locked the door not against anyone, but for everything inside. The jacarandas would drop more color tomorrow. The tomatoes would split their skins if I was careless with water. That is what life does. When you turn toward it, it becomes particular, and it asks you to pay attention. He came by after his Sunday meeting, leaner, clearer, carrying nothing that wasn't his. We sat on the balcony in the good air. We didn't talk about the house or about debt. We talked about the hinge that held and the basil that would go on his pasta and the job lead he would follow without my phone to call for him. When he stood to leave, he tapped the jar with the spare key and smiled like it was a bell only we could hear. I left a house and found a life. I lost an old role and kept my name. If you're watching from Detroit or Denver from a porch swing or a hospital chair, tell me the city you're in and one boundary you're ready to keep this week. I'll be here tending the small garden, cheering for any quiet rule that lets you keep your name. Begin today. Keep it a week. Start where you are. Breathe. I'm a mother who learned that love needs boundaries and proof. When I stopped funding chaos and started documenting truth, my peace returned. If you're worn down, write one rule you can keep for 7 days. Protect your name. Help only where effort meets accountability. Ask yourself, what line will I hold? What small action restores my dignity this week? If this story moved you, drop a 1. Or tell me your city. If it didn't say why, your voice matters here. Subscribe to the channel to follow more real American family stories and share this with someone who needs a steady hand today.